Welcome, everyone, to the 2021 Northwestern Ontario LitFest event. I'd like to begin by noting that this event is being recorded. We will be sharing our LitFest event with NOW members and the public to honor our award winners, as well as to share our guest speaker with our audience. We acknowledge that we are on the Robinson Superior Treaty territory and that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and specifically the Fort William First Nation. The Northwestern Ontario welcomes all persons, those of all ages, faiths, political affiliations, of all races, all genders, those with disabilities, and those within the LGBTQIA community. We will not tolerate or accept discrimination or hate speech of any kind. We are listening and learning to improve our organization and to provide a safe and inclusive space for all. Now, I would also like to acknowledge and thank the Ontario Arts Council, an agency of the Ontario government, for their ongoing support and funding, which helps make NOW programs such as our LitFest today a success. This past year has truly been a year like no other. Between a pandemic and having to move everything online, we've had to embrace technology, reach out our communication lines, and bond and connect with those farther away. We've challenged ourselves, grown, and met adversity head on. It has also resulted in now completely changing the way that we've had to operate over the past year. With this in mind, I offer deep thanks to my team, the NOW Board of Directors, and all of our volunteers. It's for their ingenuity, creativity, and frankly, their go-getter attitudes that they deserve this thanks. Thank you to Liz Pacholko, our Vice President and Secretary, to Charles Campbell, our Treasurer, Clayton Bai, our Regional Representative, Graham Strong, Phil Bulla, Annette Pateman, and Laura Beebe, who all serve as members at large, and to our Administrator, Don Parsons, and Contest Coordinator, Megan Stockwell. NOW would not function without your consistent efforts, ideas, commitment, and drive. Thank you. I'd also like to give thanks to Sue Blott, Tessa Soderberg, and Doug Dyzik, who have each volunteered their time to run NOW events and to create NOW products for your enjoyment. Please know that I thank each of our volunteers and those who send emails and offer ideas to make NOW a better place. Truly, to operate this organization, it takes a village, and I am grateful for each and every one of you. I'd also like to thank this year's sponsors of our writing contest. Thank you for helping to make this contest a success and for recognizing our writers and the arts within our Northern Ontario community. For short fiction, I'd like to thank the Thunder Bay Writers Guild. For poetry, Dr. Elizabeth Birmingham from Lakehead University's Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities. For creative nonfiction, I'd like to thank Gail Linklater. For haiku, Clayton Bai. And for the Bill McDonald Prize for Prose, of which it is fiction this year, I'd like to thank Kathy McDonald. My last word of thanks goes to you, to each of you, for arriving, attending, participating, enjoying, offering feedback, engaging, and diving into the world of writing with us. NOW is here to support writing within the Northern Ontario community, which means we're here for you. It's been our pleasure to offer you events and activities throughout this past year, and we hope to see you again at an event soon. Speaking of events, we have 3 remaining activities before our summer break. Next Saturday, we have a free workshop with Bonnie Hearn-Hill on Confessions of a Contest Judge from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. Later that week, we will have our Write-In Wednesday event from 7 till 8 p.m. Eastern with a writing session to follow. Zoom links for both of these events will be found on our website closer to the date. Lastly, we're providing an eWriter Lite program, which can be found on our website for full details. This is an opportunity to have your work reviewed and evaluated by author Terry Fallis. He will provide feedback and guidance towards improving your writing. To participate, please email our administrator, Dawn, at admin@nowwriters.ca, or again, visit our website should you have any curiosities or questions. This afternoon will feature a keynote address, the announcement of the Cooey Award and the Margaret Phillips Award. Following this, there will be announcements of this year's 23rd Annual International Writing Contest. We will then be offered a reading from our guest author, which will lead to closing remarks. For those of you who have signed up for the workshop on building an outline, That begins at 2:40, which give you a brief recess before the workshop begins. If we have time at the end, we are going to leave the event open here for some chit-chat amongst attendees. I'd like to now welcome our guest author for today's event, Terry Fallis, to share with us his keynote address.
That's great. Jodine, thanks so much. I hope you can all hear me. It is wonderful to be here. I'm very happy to be here, even if we're not together. I have such fond memories of my trips to Thunder Bay for book events over the years, the Sleeping Giant Writers Festival when it was happening. I'm pretty sure I did an International Festival of Authors on the Road event in Thunder Bay, which I have happy memories of too. But meeting like this is better than not meeting at all. So I'm pleased to be here. And I've certainly attended many literary festivals over the last dozen years or so, but there is something different about being amongst other writers. Of course, we love to connect with readers, but there is such passion and dedication and perseverance and spirit and generosity that I think only arises when writers gather. And I'm always inspired by it. So I'm inspired by your presence, by all of you. Thank you for including me. As I was contemplating what I might say today, I decided quite on my own, so I hope I'm not far off track, that part of my job today, I think, tall order that it is to help crystallize that feeling of hope and inspiration and renewed commitment to writing that I think this event will engender within each of you. At least I hope it engenders it within each of you. You know, as we endure this pandemic, it occurred to me that some jobs, some occupations, some professions come and go over the span of history. Given how many of us are working quite effectively from home, I wonder if commercial realtors will fade away in the wake of the pandemic. But we no longer have door-to-door milk delivery. We don't really have many blacksmiths anymore, although there are some. We don't really have switchboard operators anymore. Huge swaths of workers have been made redundant through automation, and many other new sectors have emerged, creating new kinds of jobs. But some roles in our society will always be with us. I mean, teachers, doctors, nurses, politicians, maybe dentists, even mechanics perhaps. But all of us online this afternoon are part of one of the oldest professions in the history of the world. We're writers, we're storytellers, and we've had storytellers for a very, very long time. The cave paintings date back 40,000 years to a time when the hunt, with all of its dangers and excitement, was depicted in full color on the walls of caves. And let's be clear, those ancient cave paintings were telling an important story, perhaps the most important story to the survival of that primitive society. And you can draw a direct line between those 40,000-year-old cave paintings and what we do today as writers and storytellers. We are part of a grand tradition, an enduring tradition. And it's a tradition that is sustained, regrettably, not by money and luxury and fame and recognition, although perhaps some of that might be nice. Writers are sustained by passion, and sometimes by passion's close relative, obsession. Yes, some writers are utterly compelled to write. So no matter how tough it is and how tough it becomes for writers to earn a living, no matter what societal upheavals might visit us in the future, whether wars or famine or pandemics or natural disasters, or arguably perhaps the most serious threat we face now, global warming, we will write our way through it. There will always be writers. So we've chosen a vocation with staying power, albeit sadly not lucrative except for a few perhaps. But writers have been there on the front lines through it all. Writers are still here, and I believe always will be. There's always going to be a place for writers and storytellers. And we'd better be there across the ages and into the future, because we are helping to shape civilization. We're helping to shape culture. We're telling truth to power, whether in novels, poetry, short stories, nonfiction, plays. So do not sell yourself short, even though society may appear to sell us short sometimes. We know the important collective role we're playing in recording and influencing the course of history. So all of us have earned the right to some personal pride in what we do. So thank you for your writing, your storytelling, your commitment, your resilience, your strength in carrying on when it seems at best an uphill battle and at worst utterly futile sometimes. But we persevere and we must. On that note, perhaps it's a good time to speak directly to those writers among us who are trying to publish for the first time, who are longing to take that next step, whose belief that it's going to happen to them might be flagging, whose confidence in their work might sometimes be waning. I want you to know that the space that exists between the published and unpublished writers among us is not a gaping, yawning, unbridgeable chasm, though it might seem that way at times, certainly did to me. In fact, in reality, I tell you this from personal experience, sometimes all that separates the published from the unpublished is a very, very thin, blurry, permeable, gossamer line that can instantly be erased by a brief moment of serendipity, a chance encounter at a workshop or a festival, a momentary aligning of the planets, and then everything can change. I know some of you are saying to yourselves right now, yeah, right. That only happens in movies. That could never happen to me. You are wrong. You're wrong. I know, because it happened to me. When I finished the manuscript for my first novel, a satirical novel of Canadian politics called The Best Laid Plans, I didn't even know whether I'd actually written a novel. Actually, let me just share my screen now. I pulled a few slides together to help with this. Stand by. I'll be with you in a second. Play from current slide. There. I hope you've got the slide now. All right, so I didn't even know whether I'd written a novel, and you don't need me to tell you that when you labor over a manuscript for months and months, your sense of perspective on what you have written often abandons you. So I didn't know what I had. I just had a faint sense that it was finished. And well, it turned out that the dozens and dozens and dozens of agents and publishers that I sent manuscripts out to and query letters and plot synopses for the next year, they seemed to know what I had, because after more than a year of diligently doing that, a year following up, pushing and pushing, sending out more. Do you know how many rejection letters I had received after doing that for a year? I had received 0 rejection letters. I hadn't made a big enough impression on the traditional publishing establishment to generate an automated rejection letter. So I was really nowhere. I was greeted by a deafening silence. So I pursued a different path, perhaps out of naivete, out of innocence, out of ignorance. I decided to podcast the entire novel chapter by chapter and give it away for free on iTunes as a way of building an audience for it. And I recorded that podcast in the very room in which I now sit and speak to you from today. So I podcast it, and the reaction I got, I don't know how people found it, but organically and somehow word of mouth spread online. And I had thousands of listeners to this chapter by chapter podcast. And I was concerned that no one in Canada would be interested in a satirical novel of Canadian politics, yet I was getting comments and positive salutations from all around the world, which was a great shock to me, but extraordinarily gratifying. And frankly, it was the positive feedback that came from the podcast that gave me the resolve, I guess you could say, to hit the big red button and self-publish the novel. So in September of 2007, a box of 10 books arrived in my office. This is my author package. And because it was all print on demand, these were the only 10 physical copies in existence. So I didn't really know what to do. Somebody at McMaster University, where I earned my engineering degree back in the mid 80s, He worked at the bookstore and he hosted a book launch for me down there, which was very kind of him. Both people who came seemed to enjoy the event and bought books, but I was thrilled. I'd actually had a book signing. When I got back to my office the next day, flush from my triumphant book signing at McMaster, I thought, well, what am I going to do now? And I don't know what it was, maybe a feeling of false bravado, but you will know as writers, I think, that almost every literary award in the world specifically excludes self-published works from consideration. You can't send your self-published novel into the Giller Prize or the Governor General's Awards. It just is not eligible for entry. I thought the same would be so for the Leacock Medal, the Stephen Leacock Medal for Humor. It's one of our oldest literary awards, been around since 1946. It's been won by some of my great literary heroes, Mordecai Richler, Robertson Davies, W.O. Mitchell, Paul Corrington, the list goes on. I went to the website and I looked at the eligibility requirements. There was no such limitation on self-published works, clearly an oversight on their part. They said they needed a check for $100 from the publisher. And well, I was the publisher. I had a check in my wallet. They needed a headshot of the author. I had a headshot on my computer. I had that. Finally, they said, you must send us 10 copies of the book. Now, this is going to sound like I'm making this part up, but I'm serious. If they had required 11 copies or 12 copies, Jodine would have kindly introduced somebody else here today, because I think my literary life would have been stillborn. But I had exactly 10 copies in a cardboard box suitable for mailing. I packaged it up, I put it at the front desk, and I put the right postage on it from our postage meter. Then I went back to my office. I worked for 40 minutes or so on a client memo in my day job. And then I got cold feet. I said, you can't send your self-published novel into the Leacock Medal. What are you thinking? And I ran out to pull it back. I ran to the front desk and it had left about 3 minutes earlier. It had just left. And I thought if I was fast enough, I could catch it. So I went to the elevators, and we had really balky elevators in our building. And I stopped on every floor. It wasn't intended to, but that's what happened. I stopped on every floor. By the time I got down to the lobby, I rushed outside and I watched the Canada Post truck do a U-turn on Yonge Street and head north. So it was done. You can follow on the Leacock website the entries as they come in each year, and they were due to close on December the 30th. So, I submitted in November. So from November to December 30th, I would check the website, I don't know, every 10 minutes or so, just to see who else had come into the competition. And by the time December 15th rolled along, there were only about a dozen books in the running. I could see mine there. I didn't recognize any of the other authors. Then I checked again on New Year's Eve, the day it was to close, and I scrolled through 48 books. All of the major publishers dumped theirs in at the 11th hour, and there was Douglas Copeland's new novel, The Gum Thief. There was Will Ferguson's new novel, Spanish Fly. He'd won the Leacock Medal twice by that stage. He's since won it a third time. There was Arthur Black's new collection of stories, another 3-time winner of the Leacock Medal. So I saw all these wonderful writers whom I have really enjoyed and read and revered and collected. So I said, well, that was fun while it lasted, and I kind of put it out of my mind. But the last thing I did was that I picked my top 5, who I thought would be the 5 finalists. And then I didn't give it another thought, really. I didn't give it another thought until, I would say it was March 27th, 2008, probably around 12:23:45 in the afternoon. I was in Montreal on business. I was doing a presentation for a client, and I was in this boardroom. I had read in the airport lounge that morning that the Leacock shortlist was to be unveiled today, or that day, in Orillia, the home of Stephen Leacock. So in our lunch break, I was in this boardroom, just my colleague and I, getting ready for our afternoon presentation. And I just went online and I found a story about the Leacock shortlist. It was in the Aurelia Packardin Times, and there was a photograph in the story. And, you know, our eyes always tend to go to the photos. I hadn't even read the story, but I was looking at this photograph, and it was the head of the jury and the president of the Leacock Associates with a board, and book covers were the finalists for the 2008 Leacock Medal. I started at the wrong end of the board. I saw Scott Gardner's book, King John of Canada. I had picked him to be shortlisted. There was Will Ferguson's novel, Spanish Fly, and Douglas Copeland's The Gum Thief. So I was 3 for 3. I was feeling quite chuffed about this. And I didn't recognize the fourth author I came upon. He was an Alberta writer. And finally, my eyes settled into the bottom left-hand corner of the photograph, and I was shocked to find my ugly mug and my self-published book cover there on the screen. And I mean no offense to anybody in listening today or watching today who might have had a stroke in their life, a real stroke, but I thought I'd had a stroke. I was paralyzed and I couldn't speak, so I thought stroke was a reasonable diagnosis. My colleague, who did not know what I was doing, from across the table said, "Terry, what's wrong? You just went ashen." And I have no recollection of my response. She says I just waved a limp finger in front of the screen and pointed to it. So I have no memory of the presentation I gave that afternoon, but no one complained, so I think it went all right. We flew back to Toronto that night, though I didn't really need the plane. And when I arrived in Toronto, there was a voicemail from the head of the jury, this lovely woman, Judith Rapson, who said I was a finalist. So this was an extraordinary event in my life. Within a week of being shortlisted, I landed a literary agent after almost a year and a half of trying. I'm still with her now, all these years later. And then about a month later, April the 30th, 2008, I think it was 12/46/21 when this happened. But I went to Aurelia with my wife for the announcement of the Leacock winner at the Leacock luncheon. And at the appointed hour, somehow miraculously, my name was called. This is my favorite headline from that time, because I was utterly floored by it. No self-published novel had ever won any kind of a bona fide literary award before, so it was a great shock. Within a week of winning the Leacock Medal, we signed with McClellan and Stewart, and I've been with them ever since for 8 novels and a 9th under contract still. So the self-published version of the Best Laid Plans morphed into the McClellan and Stewart version of the Best Laid Plans. This is the novel that keeps on giving. Just, to add to the, to compound the unlikelihood of all of this happening, Canada Reads came along a few years later, and the Best Laid Plans went from the top 40 to the top 10 to become a finalist. And eventually, Ali Velshi, the former CNN chief business correspondent, who was my champion on Canada Reads, took the Best Laid Plans all the way to victory. And no, I don't know what I was wearing that day in that photo. Just ignore that. But winning the Leacock, or winning the Canada Reads is an extraordinary blessing for any writer, because it sells so many books. It's now sold about 150,000 copies in Canada. If that weren't enough, the Best Laid Plans went on to become a 6-part CBC television miniseries and a stage musical in Vancouver, all because I had a box of 10 books, exactly 10 books in a box beneath my desk at my office. So I really do feel as if I have exhausted my lifetime allocation of good fortune. So it was a very lucky first novel. I don't tell this story to pump my own tires. I share this tale to show you what can happen when you do get a break, when those planets finally align, when you get a bit of luck at just the right time. So that I'm very blessed with that lucky novel. It can happen, and I'm living proof of it. But you can't just wait for Providence to stumble upon you. I think it comes to those who give all of themselves in the endeavor. So let me leave you with a quotation from someone who is, as you can imagine, very important to me, Stephen Leacock. He once said, "I'm a great believer in luck, and I find the harder I work, the more I have of it." Wise words. Let me just close with a final little story. Actually, I can probably stop sharing now, so you don't have to look at that the whole time. Stop share. Back in 2015, I was invited to come and be part of the faculty of the Surrey International Writers Conference in BC. It's a gathering of some 400 aspiring writers for a week of talks and workshops and blue pencil sessions and writing. And the closing keynote speaker, I think it was Jasper Ford, was on the last day of the conference, and he was called away on something and he was not able to do it. And I must have been the closest body around because I was asked to fill in and do some kind of a keynote on about 20 minutes notice, no pressure. But I had noticed that when we arrived, the name tags of all of the faculty members, beneath our names, it had the word writer. And on the name tags of the 400 aspiring writers who had paid to attend the conference, it just had their names and nothing else. And I can tell you that of everything that's happened in my unlikely writing life, nothing gives me more satisfaction, more validation, more pride than just seeing my name next to the word writer. So in my hastily cobbled together closing remarks, I said to all of the 400 delegates in this big hotel ballroom, I asked them to take their name tag out of the plastic sleeve. And I didn't let them not do this. I waited till they did it. I could see them all doing it. And then I told them to write the word writer in big block letters underneath their names and then put it back in the plastic case and put it back on. What I said to them was, take your name tag when you get home, place it next to where you work, where you write, your computer, your notebook, wherever you write. And in 2 months from now, when you are not quite still as inspired and flush with excitement that this conference might have given you, it might have faded a bit. When you've reached an impasse in your novel or your memoir or whatever you're writing, when your story is stalled, when your words are blocked, when you don't know where you're going or what you're doing, and we've all been there, when you're close to throwing it all away and giving it up, I want you to cast your eyes to your name tag next to your computer or your notebook and look at what it says beneath your name. Yes, it says writer, because that's what you are. That's what we are. We are writers. And the same is true for all of us here today. So in those dark moments when you hit that wall, when that crisis of confidence hangs over you, take a moment to remember that you are a writer. A writer, one of the most powerful words in our lexicon. Then take a deep breath, gather yourself, and get back to work. Have a great day, and I hope the writing goes well for you. Thank you, Jodine.
Terry, wow. What a true pleasure to have you share these stories. To begin, I feel honored to be part of, a history of writers. I mean, you really took it back to the beginning, and I think you provided a lot of hope and inspiration to our writers, particularly those that hope to be published one day. It was also wonderful to hear your publishing journey of the best laid plans, and thank goodness you ordered 10 copies. I mean, that's serendipitous at that point.
Exactly.
I just, we're all online ordering these days, and geez, 10 is apparently the right number, everyone. So thank you again, and I look forward to hearing your reading later on this afternoon. I'd like to ask Liz Pasholko to come to the forefront, please. She has some winners to announce for us.
Hello. Yes, I'm here to announce the winners of the Cooey and the Phillips Awards this year. We've been very lucky. We've been able to honor 2 people today. I'll start with the Phillips Award. It was first established in 2009 to recognize a builder, either a group or individual who has made outstanding contributions to publishing promoting or supporting the literature of Northwestern Ontario. It is intended to recognize those who support the practice and community of writing. This award is named in honor of Margaret Phillips, who was a tireless feminist, advocate for social justice, and co-founder of the Northern Women's Bookstore. This year's recipient is Kathy McDonald. Kathy has funded the Bill McDonald Prize for Prose in NOW's annual writing contest for several years now. By supporting a specific category for Northwestern Ontario writers and stories, she encourages writing that is set in our region. The Bill McDonald Prize also honors the memory of Bill McDonald, of course, Kathy's late husband, who drew inspiration for so many of his books from this region. Kathy has also been a quiet but generous supporter of NOW's general programming. This support has funded writer development through e-writer in residence programs and inspired many other projects. NOW members have had the opportunity to be mentored by writers such as Catherine Kutenbauer, Gary Barwin, and Susan Olding. Kathy is also a great supporter of the arts in general in Thunder Bay and surrounding area. As part owner of Fireweed Crafts, she helps promote artists and craftspeople of all types, including writers. Kathy is also very humble and avoids the spotlight. She graciously declined a chance to address this year's LitFest event, but expressed great pleasure at receiving this award. Thank you so much for all you have done, Kathy. The Cooey Award recognizes a writer who has a significant history of contributing to the literature of Northwestern Ontario. Recipients are evaluated on the breadth and depth of their full body of work and are respected members of the literary community. The award is named after poet Elizabeth Cooey. This year's recipient is Joe Fiorito. Joe was born in Fort William, Ontario. He is a veteran journalist, author, and poet. He has worked as a CBC radio producer and a city columnist for the Montreal Gazette, the Globe and Mail, the National Post, and the Toronto Star newspapers. He won the National Newspaper Award for columns in 1995, the Bressani Prize for short fiction in 2000. In 2003, Joe received the Toronto Book Award for his novel Song Beneath the Ice. He is the author of 8 books, including 2 collections of poetry, the latest being City Poems. To quote one of Joe's nominators, he is an original, compelling, contemporary Canadian voice who has produced a major body of work and who, I hope, will continue to write and open our eyes to Canadian realities. In The Closer We Are to Dying, Joe's memoir about his father and growing up in Westfort, he explains why he pushed his father to tell all the old stories on his deathbed. If Dusty feels young when he tells the old stories, if he feels like a boy when he remembers, then I will force him back to his youth. I will lead him. I will urge him. I will push him into the brightest corners of the oldest stories. Thank you, Joe, for sharing the brightest corners with your readers. And
Thank you
Joe
very
is
much.
here.
And I'm delighted to accept this award named to honor Elizabeth Cooey, and I'm proud to stand with those who accepted it before me. I want to acknowledge a couple of previous honorees. Dorothy Colby, whose son Scott was my colleague when I worked at the Toronto Star. We understood some of the same things: small town, big city, 2 ways of seeing, and 1 way of seeing through. Charlie Wilkins, I forget where we met because as soon as I met him, I felt as if I'd known him forever. And of course, my friend Joan Barry, who's done more for Northern Ontario writing than anyone I know. Let me be specific. I'm from Fort William, and in Fort William, I'm from Westfort. Westfort's where I learned to keep my eyes open and my mouth shut. As it happens, those are the first tools of a writer. Westfort is where I learned that nothing is ever what it seems. And that's a tool of journalism. Look deep, look deeper. Westfort's also where I learned not to pick a fight and not to back down from one. And somehow that's the basis for my poetry. I learned 2 quite opposite things on Christina Street: how not to draw attention to myself and how to tell a story. Both of those things are valuable in an Italian family. Know when to duck and when to entertain. I learned that art could be made from the matter at hand. And this was a kind of accidental lesson. The first time I saw the panels painted in the bush by the group of 7, oh, I used to go fishing there. I realized that the raw material for art is what's at hand. The local is universal if you know what to make of it. I learned to read early, and that's how I learned to write. But a trip down the block to the Mary J. L. Black Library was not an escape, it was an entry into a world beyond. When I was growing up, I needed to know there was a world beyond. I still do during COVID times. But everywhere I've been over the past 40 years, I've been guided by the sound of the train rocking past our little stucco house on Christina Street at night, and the sulfur smell of the mill on Monday mornings, and the sweet smell of the dust from the grain elevators, and the sharp smell of creosote. I still crush a cedar frond between my thumb and forefinger whenever I can, because the fragrance reminds me of home. Blue lake, blue mountain, blue sky. Now, after 35 years of journalism, I've returned to my first love, poetry. I'm self-taught in this way of saying, but I was led to poetry by 3 teachers in high school: Jeannie Regatto at St. Pat's, George Spensos, and above all, Al Jack at Westgate. I don't receive this without them. Journalism took me away from Northern Ontario. This honor brings me back. Thank you.
Congratulations to both Kathy McDonald as well as you, Joe. We appreciate all that you've both done for our communities, whether it's through building, as Kathy has done, or through reflecting our Northern Ontario community in your work. I wish you much congratulations, and we are honored to award this to you. And thank you for being here today. I'd like to introduce Megan Stockwell, the 2020-2021 NOW Contest Coordinator, please.
Good afternoon. On behalf of NOW, I would like to extend appreciation to all of those involved in this year's contest organization, our screeners, our judges, and to all of our award sponsors. A special thank you goes out to our 5 category judges, Negan Sinclair, KJ Monroe, Sherry D. Wilson, Walt Bryce, and Emily St. John Mendel. We are thrilled each year to work with such accomplished and diverse Canadian writers, and this year was no exception. Along with our screeners, judges, and award sponsors, the writing contest would not be what it is without the incredible work submitted by all of our participants. Each year, our screeners and judges are blown away by the talent and caliber of our participants. It is my absolute pleasure every year receiving notes from the screeners and judges raving about the year's entries. The entire contest is judge blind. Neither the screeners nor the judges are made aware of the writer. From the entries that are submitted, the top 6 are selected by the screener and then sent to the judge, who makes the final decision on the winning entries. Judges select the top 3 entries in all categories. It is with great excitement and honor I announce this year's winners of the Northwestern Ontario Writers Workshop Annual Writing Contest. After all the winners in each category are announced, we will read a short excerpt from the winning piece. We are beginning with haiku, and our haiku judge was KJ Monroe. In 3rd place, an unnamed selection by Michael Dudley. The KJ Monroe commented, "Haiku poets are known for noticing the details that are often overlooked. They find and write about the extraordinary in the ordinary. In Ray's Nail Head, the indentation of lines 2 and 3 help to illustrate and emphasize the particular things being discussed. The poet has observed a slight imperfection in carpentry. Maybe this wooden seat is worn from many years of use. The reader can picture a graveyard visitor lost in thought, absent-mindedly feeling alone in the edges of a seat, suddenly seeing the rainbow that has appeared with the sun through the showers. Or perhaps the nail has caught bits of fabric and colored threads, and this is what captured the poet's attention." In 2nd place, Nature by Sue Blott. Celestial images are explored in this entry: clouds in the sky, snowflakes, and moon. Rhyming words are not often found in haiku, but the contrast between a full moon in January and the unhappy dog is effective here. Again, the use of sound adds another sensory dimension to the poem. The reader might consider other related concepts like lone wolf and the idea that both dogs and wolf are social animals that prefer to roam in a pack. Does the dog wish to be prowling like the wolf moon, or is he lamenting the loneliness of the empty street? And finally, our first place winner, Relationship by Sue Blott. The 3 poems in this entry are linked thematically. All have to do with different aspects of trees or wood. The first poem may be a pandemic poem. An active household staying home together, possibly in an older home, creates a kind of beautiful music. In the second poem, the stage is set with In Winter Wind. The reader can feel people leaning into each other, bracing against it. Of course, pine trees creak as they rub together in the wind. Rather than relying solely on the sense of sight, the use of sound is refreshing. There is also the possible implication that the leaning people may also be cracking. The third poem may be concerned with perspective. There can be 2 sides to the story, and by concentrating only on the negative, one can fail to spot something positive. This is expressed by describing the bark of the tree trunk in 2 different ways. Congratulations to all of our winners for the haiku category, and now I will ask Charles to read Sue Blott's Relationship.
Thanks, Megan, and congratulations to Sue and to everybody in the category. Throughout the house, floorboards groan, our home together music. In winter wind, we lean together, creak of pines. Silver birch trunk, concentrating on the scar, I miss the carved heart.
Thank you, Charles. The next category is creative nonfiction with our judge, Negan Sinclair. In third place, He and I by Vera Constantino. Negan writes, mixing genre and perspective, this narrative is deceptively layered and is honest, truthful, and complex as the love story being told. In second place, What If by Robin Strong. Somber and full of dynamic language and images, this is a story of how familial generations of women find solace in the voice of knowledge and experience. And finally, in first place, Lost Innocence by Cindy Matthews. Rhythmic, funny, and stark, this story is rich in metaphor and takes the reader on a journey through time and space, yet fills in the space with a rich and satisfying narrative. Congratulations to all of our winners. I will now read a selection, a part of, of Lost Innocence. Children think sex is funny. Joe Brainard, author of the memoir, I Remember. I remember the milkman parking his truck in the alley between our hotel and the liquor store. 3 times a week, he replaced the empty milk bottles with new ones. I remember moving to the hotel one November, the crumbling tan brick next to the entrance sprinkling the sidewalk like flakes of oatmeal. I remember leaving my friend Susan behind. I remember at my new school, instead of notebooks, we used sheets of paper the size of a paperback, fastened everything together with metal rings from the stationery store next to our hotel. I remember my dad hated the other hotel in town, and more than once I heard him mutter, if only it would burn down. I remember the year I turned 11. That was the summer my father ruined my life. Okay, so the next section will be short fiction. Our short fiction judge this year was Emily St. John Mendel. In third place, we have The Roach Family by Cindy Matthews. Emily notes, I thought the prose was excellent. I loved the unusual details, and I found the complicated emotional landscape of this story to be wholly convincing. In second place, Escape from Slugbrook Academy by Tina Petrick. I love both the ambition and the world building here. This story has a real dynamicism about it. The dystopian setup is convincing and the multiple reveals are wonderful. And in first place, Pretending by Sue Blott. This story has a simplicity about it that's quite difficult to pull off. Pretending is heartbreaking in a low-level way that sneaks up on you. The unadorned clarity of the prose makes this story stand out to me. Congratulations to all of our winners, and now I will read a small section of Pretending by Sue Blott. Why do my parents think they can talk over my head to each other and expect me not to hear or understand them? Mom does it again with Dad, while the three of us perch on the couch together in front of Dad's laptop, playing virtual quiplash with Aunt Dolly and my two cousins. Over my head, my mom hisses, "Supposed to be a kid-appropriate game, and the question is about naming your nipples?" Beside me, I can feel Dad shrug. I don't look at them. I stare off at the screen, focus on the face of my cousin Lucy, who is 6 months younger than me. She sticks her tongue out. Anyone can tell she's younger. Dad squirms and moves forward to type. "Act normal," he says to Mom as if I wasn't right there. "Give me an answer, quick." Since the virus and isolation, Sundays have become virtual game afternoons for our family. Usually Mom and Dad ask for help. "Kristen, what do you think? You can answer this one, Kristen." Except for naming nipples. I don't get asked my guesses for that one. The music speeds up. Time is running out. Mom jumps up and down in her seat. Twist." Dad types in and then yells, "Tweak," and types that in. Together they collapse back on the couch, giggling. I shake my head at Lucy, who shakes her head back. Crazy. I pretend like everything's normal and that their answers don't sound super painful. The next section is poetry, and our judge was Sherry D. Wilson. In third place, an unnamed collection by Kevin Bizanson. Sherry D notes, "Very strong poems. The images are spellbinding. I really enjoyed reading them. You may want to play with music, especially as it relates to accentuates your amazing imagery." We also had a second third place winner. We had a tie for third place this year. And the tie also went to an unnamed collection by Tanis McDonald. Strong imagery, and I liked how you play with the elements of surprise. In second place, Histrionics by Morgan Thomas. I was captivated by your poetry and appreciate your voice and the immediacy of your subject matter. The music lies right below the surface, and I deeply appreciate what you are doing with this work. Sometimes I see a poem, other times I hear it, but it is when I experience the poem that it lives within me for all time. And in first place, Winter Thoughts by Siobhan Farrell. Loved your connection to the natural world and the curiosity expressed in your wonderment. Your attention to detail and the simplicity of your language deepen the observations in your poetry, which is compelling to read. I also enjoyed the music in your work, and the rhythm is an absolute joy. Congratulations to all of our winners for poetry, and I will pass this off to Charles to read from Winter Thoughts.
Winter Thoughts. Why did I start thinking about salamanders? I have no particular interest in amphibians, or reptiles for that matter. They're a cross between lizards and frogs, with long tails and 4 legs, or only 2. They even eat meat, which is somehow scary. It's true when I was 5, I collected frogs and plopped them into an old bathtub crusted with algae. I saw a rattler in a dinosaur park, ran over a white python in South Africa, reluctantly picked up grass snakes from time to time. I have shared rooms with geckos as they seesawed up and down on smooth walls, catching mosquitoes. As long as they kept their distance, I kept mine. I love the deep voices of bullfrogs croaking in unison, telling me everything will be fine. Salamanders are blissfully yellow or orange and slimy. They dart through sweaty leaves, fallen logs, and soft brown earth, their smooth skin, dark beady eyes blinking against the sun. Salamanders couldn't live this far north. Their skin would crack, they would soon go hungry, while snakes and frogs know quite well when to bury themselves under the snow.
Thank you, Charles. Our final category that I will be announcing is the Bill McDonald Prize for Prose. This year, it was short fiction. Our judge was Wab Bryce. In third place, Signs by Dorothea Belanger. Signs is a heartfelt look at the complicated relationships between grown men and how those bonds evolve as they age. Told through various hunting endeavors and the characters' relationship with the land around them. It's an essential Northern Ontario story. In second place, Kin by Sue Blott. A timely short story about enduring the COVID-19 pandemic, Kin profoundly explores the depths of grief and the moments of beauty on the path to healing. I especially appreciate the youth perspective in portraying the resilience of children and their wonderful outlook through trying times. And in first place, Beyond Tears by J.F. Folds. This coming-of-age story set against a backdrop of class and labor divisions in the 1950s is a thoroughly compelling piece of short fiction. I really enjoyed the building tension and flashes of humor throughout, guided by an intriguing, complex protagonist. Congratulations to all of our winners, and I will now ask Clayton to read a piece from Beyond Tears.
2 days after Dad's funeral, I was preparing to go back to school. My mother had already left for daily mass before she began work again as a nurse's aide at St. Jacob's Hospital. I was banking down our coal fire when I spotted a pair of Dad's leather-topped winter work boots standing by the furnace. That's where he always kept them to dry out after one of his union organizing trips into the Northwestern Ontario bush. Frayed at the end, the bootlaces trailed on the cement floor. I slammed the furnace door shut. I kicked one of the boots to the far end of the basement and hurled the other after it. My fists hammered the wooden wall of our coal bin. I sank onto the basement stairs. I had never found the time to tell my father I loved him. My baptism had taken place in the unheated and unconsecrated winter chapel of St. Jacob's Roman Catholic Church, so that discreetly in the background with his fedora held respectfully behind his back, my atheistic communist father could attend. At the marble gray baptismal font, fat Father Mulligan, his breath thick with sacramental wine, wheezed into my face. In nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. I baptized thee, Edward Harry Johnstone. A dozen people murmured, Amen. Mulligan slurred over Davy, my father told me. I insisted that you be given your mother's maiden name, Davy. He didn't like that. Thought you should be named after a saint. So the slurring could have been deliberate. More likely, it was the mass wine speaking. He was always into the sauce. But you know what? You howled so loud and long when that cold, slimy, holy water hit your scalp. I knew you were going to be a fighter.
Congratulations to all of this year's winners. It's a true pleasure to hear your work and to celebrate your writing accomplishments. It's our pleasure to ask Terry Fallis to join us again and provide us with a reading from his work.
Thank you, Jodine, very much. Thanks for having me back. I thought I would do something I've never done before, and that is I'm going to be reading for the very first time from my new novel that comes out in August. It's called Operation Angus. It brings back the characters from my first two novels. And It's narrated by Daniel Addison, who is the Chief of Staff to the Honorable Angus McClintock, the Scottish emigre to Canada, who is an accidental member of Parliament and has now actually ascended to the cabinet table. I'll probably be affecting a couple of very bad accents in this, so please forgive me. There's an English accent and there's a Scottish accent. You may not be able to tell the difference, and they may sound more like Russian accents for all I know, but it's good practice for me because I'm recording the audiobook sometime next month. So for Penguin Random House. So I'll read you the first half of the novel. Okay, no, I won't do that. That's a bit too much. I'm just going to start from the beginning. I'm going to read the first few pages, about 8 pages or so. And it opens in London, in England. Chapter 1. An MI6 agent just asked me to meet her in an hour at a pub around the corner, I blurted out. And, well, and what, man? Angus asked. You're seeking advice on what to wear or who should pay? He stood in the doorway, decked out in pajama bottoms and a white t-shirt that proclaimed, Hovercraft lovers do it on air. By the look of him, he'd been sound asleep when I knocked. Mind you, whether in the House of Commons or his boathouse workshop, day or night, his long hair and beard almost always looked as if he'd just driven through a hurricane in a convertible. Well, I don't really know. I guess I just wanted to tell somebody that I'm meeting a secret agent in a London pub late at night for a clandestine meeting. Well, Daniel, my lad, but by my reckoning, if you're saying that out loud in a hotel corridor, you haven't quite grasped the fundamentals of the spy game. Did she actually use the words clandestine meeting? Well, no, I guess I'm just projecting given the circumstances and all. Well, you'd better come in. I'm bleeding awake now anyway. And this hallway is not the venue for a conversation about MI6. Well, sorry, Angus, it's still early. I figured you wouldn't be asleep yet. After the day we've had, I'm knackered. Nothing is quite so enervating as an interminable and mind-numbing meeting where people talk too much but say too little. We were almost at the end of April and had been in London for 2 days with one more to go before flying back to Ottawa. It was our last stop on a whirlwind tour of European capitals, Rome, Paris, Berlin, and London, for meetings. In case you don't follow Canadian politics, Angus McClintock had won re-election a few months before, a crazy tale all on its own, and was appointed Minister of State for International Relations. Now, to be clear, he was not the Minister of Foreign Affairs, one of the true plum postings in cabinet. No, think of him more as the junior minister supporting the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And Angus and I were just fine with that for his first time at the grown-ups table. We handled lower profile, read lower priority and less important, policy areas and assignments like international aid and those choreographed and often substance-free visits by foreign leaders to Canada. On this trip, Angus and I were part of a Canadian delegation in London for discussions with our G8 counterparts about the upcoming summit in Washington. Of course, Angus was not responsible for Canada's involvement in the G8. After all, the G8 summit is a big deal, so naturally the Minister of Foreign Affairs has the lead. What Angus and I were on the hook for was planning a very brief stopover meeting in Ottawa between our Prime Minister and the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, as the feared former head of the KGB traveled back to Moscow. While Angus and I had bilateral meetings lined up with the Russian delegation the next day to discuss security for the president's visit to Ottawa, the real reason for the London trip was a formal briefing on the G8 summit preparations. As host of the upcoming summit, the Americans led the formal briefing, which covered all facets of the annual G8 shindig. Our Minister of Foreign Affairs was there with her considerable entourage, as were delegations from the other G8 countries. Angus and I were also there. Well, sort of. To be honest, a practice I fully support, particularly in politics, Angus and I were just bit players at this major London meeting. Proximity to the action is one clear measure of just how important you are perceived to be. So when I say Angus and I were bit players, I mean we were in the room for the big US briefing, but we were seated on the extreme periphery of the proceedings, nearly in a different postal code from the boardroom table. but we were really only there to hear about flight departure protocols and timing for President Podovkin's short hop from Washington to Ottawa. In the 4-hour briefing, the specific information that we cared about consumed about 4 minutes. Yep, 4 scintillating minutes that kept me on the edge of my sleep. Even hours later, back in the hotel room, I was still feeling the effects of the stultifying briefing. But the mystery text I just received shook me from my stupor. It said, I was in the briefing with you today, the no longer young woman seated on the far side of the room from you and saying nothing. I'm MI6. Please meet me at 2200 at the Copper Cup Pub, back corner table, dark blue dress. It's important, strictly confidential, and very unofficial. While frightfully cliche, tell no one and do come alone. I had read her text several times and my heart rate moved up the dial from lethargy right past, well, this is exciting, and held steady midway between red alert and battle stations. The 4th time I read it, I decided her words were unlikely to change. So I lowered my phone and instead paced up and down my room until I left a discernible trail on the carpet. That only took about 5 minutes. I don't think it was quality broadloom. I'd always thought the idea of one's hair standing up on the back of one's neck was a myth, carefully cultivated by thriller writers and horror films. Turned out I was wrong. I pushed mine back down, then sat on my bed and thought long and hard about what to do, how to respond. There were so many options. Go to the meeting at the pub, go to the head of the Canadian delegation, go to our British government contact, go to a movie, go to sleep. And then in the midst of this maelstrom of possible responses, the answer materialized before me with crystal clarity. Of course, go to Angus. All right then, lad, from the top, Angus said as he collapsed onto his bed. Well, 10 minutes ago, which would have been at 2050, I began in my most authoritative voice, but stopped when Angus lifted one eyebrow so high it threatened to break free from his forehead. What? I asked. 2050? Have you joined the military? I'm just trying to bring some clarity to the story's details and avoid any confusion. It just sounds a tad pretentious, and I fear it would soon be annoying. Annoying? Well, I don't know why. I've only been doing it since 2100, I said, checking my watch. Besides, I'm really just trying to get into the spirit of the evening. They always use the 24-hour clock in spy novels. James Bond never arrives 12 hours late for a secret rendezvous because MI6 uses the 24-hour clock. Oh, sorry, lad. Did you say something? I must have drifted back to sleep there. Now, can you move the sheep into the shearing pen with a wee bit more alacrity? Of course, but I don't know why we have to bring sheep into this. Anyway, the text came into my personal cell phone, not my government-issued mobile. So the message was clean, off the grid, and off the books. Who are you spouting now, Tom Clancy or the Ludlam lad? Suffering, Daniel, get to the point. Okay, so here's her text, I said, handing him my phone. His eyes moved across the screen. Given the ensuing pause, I suspect he too read from the text more than once. Eventually, he looked back to me. Well, I didn't know how we're going to find you a dark blue dress to wear in the next hour, Angus said. I think that's what she's going to be wearing. Ye gods, Daniel, can you not tell when I'm having you on? Right, sorry. I'm a little nervous and maybe a little excited. So where is this Copper Cup? I've not heard of it. I Googled it. It's just around the corner from here. She must know where we're staying. Daniel, she's MI6. She probably knows what you had for breakfast and the brand of underwear you favor, Angus said. And one thing's certain, you'll not be going on your own, a lamb to the slaughter. I'll be your... He snapped his fingers in search of the right word. Watson? No, not him. Robin to my Batman? Certainly not. Sancho Panza? Ugh, no, there'll be no tilting at windmills tonight. Wingman, I suggested, and that's my final offer. That's it. Aye, wingman. I'll be your wingman. I wasn't sure a wingman was a good idea. On the other hand, 2 heads are better than 1 when venturing into uncharted waters. A paddle wouldn't hurt either. But her instructions were not to speak to anyone and to come alone. She might bolt if we both show up. No, I don't think so. Not if I arrive after you've already sat down. Besides, a few fingers of single malt would aid a smooth return to the horizontal when we get back here. I replied to her text, agreeing to meet her. Then Angus and I cooked up a plan, or at least the pale imitation of something that approached the impression of a hazy semblance of a plan. At 21:45, I texted her again to announce I was on my way, but my message bounced back with a notice that the number was not in service. I went anyway. Perhaps she'd been using a burner phone. Spies are always using burner phones in espionage novels. It was raining when I emerged from our hotel. Knowing that it was London in the spring, though, you probably didn't need me to mention the rain. The pub was only a couple of blocks away, so I just lowered my head and trotted through the drizzle. The Copper Cup was at the dark end of an alley, a little ways from a major thoroughfare. It seemed like a sensible location for a clandestine meeting with an intelligence operative, but I still was a little jumpy. The establishment appeared to be an above-board operation, but it was not above ground. I had to descend an outside staircase before entering the basement pub. It was dim inside, but since I'd been walking in the dark, my eyes had already adjusted. I'd decided I needed to turn up my observational powers for the meeting, so I casually scanned the room, trying not to give the impression that I was scanning the room. Turning 360 degrees on the spot probably wasn't the right approach. There were booths lining 3 walls of the room, freestanding tables and chairs occupying the interior space, and a long, dark wooden bar along the remaining wall. Sconces gave off a yellow-orange glow that seemed warm and welcoming without illuminating very much. I saw her just where she said she'd be. She sat in a booth at the rear of the pub in a blue dress, with her back to the corner, giving her a full view of the pub's interior. Standard operating procedure in spy novels. I recognized her immediately from our meeting. Shortish hair with gray and sandy duking it out. The gray was winning. I pegged her as late 50s or early 60s, though I'm not gifted at estimating women's ages and have the scars to prove it. When our eyes met, she nodded almost imperceptibly. I kept my cool and waved enthusiastically, causing patrons at 4 neighboring tables to wave back, tentatively with a "do I know you" plastered look on their faces. She rolled her eyes. Embarrassed and halfway to humiliated, I crammed my hand in my pocket, made my way over to her, and sat down. "Did you wish to alert the media that you have arrived?" she asked, seeming annoyed. "Sorry, I'm new to the whole late night MI6 meeting thing." She winced when I said MI6. "Right, sorry again. I'm Daniel Addison." "Yes, you are," she agreed. I waited for her to continue. When she didn't, I prompted. "And you are?" "Taking a big risk meeting you and violating umpteen provisions of the Official Secrets Act." She looked up to the ceiling, perhaps for patience, and sighed before lowering her eyes back to me. They were softer now. "You can call me Fleming." I nodded. A bit of context to start. I'm a career MI6 officer. I've committed more than 35 years of service to Her Majesty's government. I spent much of that in the field in various international postings, often attached to our High Commission, but not always. For the last 10 years, I've been languishing at a desk job, and I'm about to retire in less than a month. "Can I ask how you got my personal cell phone number?" She smiled. "Daniel, you're an official delegate from Canada, and I work at MI6. We actually have your contact information. It was circulated to dozens of civil servants, including me. And even if I didn't already have it, I could find your mobile number without difficulty. I could also remotely scan your contacts, review your call log, and track your location. It's what all intelligence agencies do." I suspected as much, but was still a little surprised to have it confirmed in casual conversation. "Right, good to know," I conceded. "But why reach out to me? I'm not exactly at the apex of power in Canada, and I'm certainly not part of the intelligence establishment." "You just answered your own question." Her eyes looked past me and widened as Angus hove into view beside us. He'd tamed his hair and beard to the best of his ability, which meant that it merely looked messy and unkempt rather than chaotic and frightening. He was dressed neatly enough, but it took observers a while to work their way down from his memorable head to his unremarkable clothes. I made room for him on my side of the booth, and he slid in. "Hello, I'm Angus McClintock. Good to see you again." Despite the addition of Angus to the cramped quarters, the temperature in the booth dropped precipitously. This suddenly felt like a very big mistake. Why don't I stop there? Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Terry. We love getting the inside scoop on your upcoming book. Thank you for sharing the opening. We'll call it an excerpt, the first 8-ish pages or so. And unexpectedly, we got a performance of accents today, which I don't think any of us were anticipating.
Well,
But
good of
not
you to
bad,
consider
not
them
bad.
accents. I'm not sure they were really accents, but thank you.
We'll call them maybe accent adjacent, perhaps.
Yes, good, very good.
I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. While this year has been incredibly atypical, joining together via Zoom to celebrate writing and our writing community is always a real pleasure. So we're going to leave this call open for those who wish to chit chat and catch up with one another until about 2:35. And then at 2:40, 2:45, for those who have registered for the workshop, you will have been emailed a link to attend that. So we will begin at about, like I said, about 2:45. So thank you everyone for attending and have a pleasant afternoon. And please consider the room open for discussion and catching up.